Permissive society. The permissive society was a new society of post-war Europe. World War I opened a hole in rigid code and morals, and in the 1920s people had witnessed experimentation with drugs and sexual freedom. For example, in Berlin, police issued cards that permitted female and male homosexual prostitutes to practice their trade, but this only touched a small amount of people. However, in the 1960s, after World War II, there was a sexual revolution in which Sweden took the lead. They had liberal legislation such as sex education in schools and decriminalization of homosexuals. The rest of Europe and the US followed Sweden's example. In the 1960s, there was an introduction of birth control pill, and divorce rates increased. Premarital and extramarital sexual experiences also increased. Cities like Amsterdam, which allowed open prostitution and the open sale of pornography, attracted many tourists.
The decade of the 1960s also saw an emergence of drug culture, especially among the youth. Marijuana became the drug of choice. The younger generation also started protesting against the older generation, spurred by opposition to the Second Vietnam War and growing political consciousness. After World War II, European states fostered a greater equality of opportunity in higher education, but problems arose when there were too many students and professors paid no attention to the students. Youth protests became student revolts. German students were motivated by wanting to destroy the corrupt old order and were influenced by social philosopher Herbert Marcuse. Capitalism had undermined the dissatisfaction of oppressed masses by encouraging consumption of material things. The lyric of rock and folk music reflected the rebellious mood of many young people. A popular slogan was, "Make love, not war." Student protests backfired, however, because they provoked a reaction from people who favored order.
Along with the youth movement came a feminist movement. Women protested their legal inequalities with men. Betty Friedan didn't want to simply be the ideal housewife and analyze problems of the middle class. She founded the National Organization for Women to bring them into full participation in the mainstream society. She helped develop the 19th U.S. Amendment guaranteeing rights for women.
One of the major issues was that mobilized youthful European protesters was the war in Vietnam, which they saw as an act of imperialism. They divided Americans after President Lyndon Johnson sent troops to war in Vietnam. Teach-ins, sit-ins, and the occupation of buildings were more radical demonstrations that led to violence. These anti-war demonstrations worn down the willingness of Americans to continue the war, and this heightened the appeal for law and order.